on September 3, 1939, the world seemed to hold its breath. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, as families across Britain gathered tightly around their radios, their faces pale, their hands trembling. The static crackle of the broadcast cut through the silence like a knife, and then his voice emerged, steady, somber, and resolute. Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, spoke words that would echo through history. This country is at war with Germany. In that moment, time itself seemed to fracture. Children clutched their mothers' hands, fathers stared blankly at the floor, and the weight of what was to come settled over the nation like a storm cloud, dark and unyielding. The world they knew was gone, replaced by an uncertain, foreboding future. The nation holds its breath. Fear grips every home. What does this mean? What lies ahead? No one knows. But just minutes later, a telegram arrives at the Navy headquarters. It's short, just 3 words, but those words carry the weight of hope. Asterisk, Winston is back. Asterisk, Winston Churchill. The name alone stirs emotions. A man of bold decisions, fiery speeches, and unshakable resolve. He would go on to lead Britain through its darkest hours during World War II. But Churchill was more than just a war leader. He was a controversial figure, a risk-taker, and a man whose decisions shaped not only the fate of a nation but also the global economy. Most people know Churchill as the prime minister who stood firm against Hitler. But few realize the profound impact he had on finance, economics, and the world at large. Even as bombs fell and cities crumbled, Churchill was making decisions that would echo far beyond the war. From the gold standard to war finances, his choices left a lasting mark on Britain and the world. But Churchill's story is not just one of triumph. It's also a story of controversy, struggle, and redemption. From the devastating Bengal famine that claimed millions of lives to his support for brutal war tactics, Churchill's legacy is as complex as it is monumental. How could the man who helped defeat Hitler also be responsible for such dark chapters in history? To understand Winston Churchill, we must go back to the beginning. We must explore the experiences that shaped him, the struggles that molded him, and the motivations that drove him. Because here's the thing, Churchill wasn't born a hero. He wasn't even born a leader. Winston Churchill was born in 1874 into one of England's most celebrated aristocratic families. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a prominent political leader. His mother, Jenny Jerome, was an American socialite known for her beauty and charm. On the surface, it seemed like young Winston was destined for greatness. But his early years tell a different story. Churchill struggled in school. At the age of 13, he barely managed to get into the lowest tier class at Harrow, a prestigious boys' school near London. His father, Lord Randolph, was convinced that Winston wasn't cut out for politics or law. The army is the best option for him, Lord Randolph declared. But even the army wasn't easy for Winston. He failed the entrance exam to Sandhurst, the Royal Military Academy, not once but twice. It wasn't until his 3rd attempt that he finally succeeded. For many, this would have been a crushing blow. But for Churchill, it was just the beginning. Once he was in, he quickly made his mark. Maybe it was the struggle of his early years. Maybe it was the high expectations of his father. Whatever it was, Churchill developed a relentless drive to prove himself. He pursued excellence in everything he did, and it wasn't long before his ambitions began to grow. After receiving his commission as a cavalry officer in 1895, Churchill's imperial adventures began. He traveled the world, reporting on conflicts and gaining first-hand experience of war and politics. These experiences fueled his growing political ambitions. In 1900, just 1 year after leaving the army, Churchill entered politics. He secured a seat in Parliament, marking the start of a career that would span decades. But Churchill wasn't content to simply follow in his father's footsteps. He had his own ideas, his own vision for the future. In 1904, he made a bold move that shocked many. He left the Conservative Party and joined the Liberals. His belief in social reform set him apart from his peers. While his ideas weren't always popular, his vision was undeniable. By 1911, Churchill had become the First Lord of the Admiralty. He wasted no time in modernizing the British Navy, preparing it for the challenges of a new era. But even as his political career soared, Churchill's attention began to shift. There were significant economic changes taking place, and they would soon demand his full focus. One of Churchill's first major economic decisions was to bring Britain back to the gold standard in 1925. The gold standard had been abandoned during World War I as the country struggled with war debts and inflation. Returning to it seemed like a way to restore financial stability and boost confidence in the economy. But the reality was far from ideal. The move led to inflation, high unemployment, and widespread economic strain. The miners were hit hardest, and in 1926, they led one of the largest labor movements in British history. The country was thrown into turmoil, with protests in the streets and unrest everywhere. Churchill's response was strict austerity measures, including cuts to military spending. But even he began to see that the gold standard was failing. By the early 1930s, it was clear that the policy wasn't working. Unemployment remained high, and the economy was in shambles. In 1931, Britain finally abandoned the gold standard. The decision took a toll on Churchill's reputation in economic circles. Many saw it as a failure, and his political career seemed to be on the brink of collapse. But something else was happening, something far bigger than Churchill, bigger than Britain. Beyond the country's borders, a storm was brewing, a storm that would change the course of history. As Britain struggled with financial instability in the 1930s, a far greater threat loomed on the horizon: World War II. The storm clouds of war were gathering, and the world was on the brink of chaos. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain knew that the nation needed a leader who could unite the people and stand firm against the rising tide of Nazi aggression. That leader was Winston Churchill. Chamberlain was well aware of Churchill's unwavering commitment to defeating Hitler. He trusted Churchill to rally the nation and lead it through the storm. In 1939, as tensions grew, Churchill returned to his old post as First Lord of the Admiralty. That's when the famous telegram went out: Winston is back, *. Churchill's return marked the beginning of a new chapter in British history. Over the next 5 years, he would serve as Prime Minister, guiding the nation through its darkest hours. His decisive and fearless leadership would take Britain from the brink of defeat to ultimate victory. But how did he do it? What made Churchill such an extraordinary leader? One of Churchill's greatest strengths was his ability to inspire through words. He was an incredible orator, a master of language who could move hearts and minds with his speeches. In times of despair, his words became a rallying cry for the nation. Churchill understood that victory wasn't just about strategy and weapons, it was about morale. The British people needed hope, and Churchill gave it to them. His speeches, filled with passion and determination, reminded the nation of its strength and resilience. One of his most famous speeches came during the early days of the war, when the situation looked bleak. "We shall fight on the beaches," he declared. "We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." These words became a symbol of Britain's defiance. They gave the people the courage to keep going, even when the odds seemed impossible. Churchill knew that Britain couldn't fight alone. To defeat Hitler, he needed allies, and so he worked tirelessly to build key alliances with other nations. One of his most important partnerships was with American President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Churchill convinced Roosevelt to provide Britain with the materials and supplies it needed to sustain the war effort. It wasn't easy. Roosevelt had his doubts, and America was hesitant to get involved in another global conflict. But Churchill's persistence paid off. He also formed an unlikely alliance with Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Despite their differences, Churchill and Stalin shared a common goal: defeating the Axis powers. Together, they coordinated their actions and combined their resources to take on a shared enemy. These alliances didn't come without challenges. Churchill often had to travel across the globe, embarking on dangerous journeys to meet with his allies. It was exhausting work, but Churchill knew that the fate of Britain depended on it. If the alliances failed, so would Britain. As the war dragged on, another problem emerged. Britain was running out of money. The cost of the war was staggering, and the nation's gold and currency reserves were dwindling. Churchill knew that without financial support, Britain's fight against Germany would collapse. In December 1940, Churchill wrote a desperate letter to President Roosevelt. "The moment approaches when we shall no longer be able to pay cash for shipping and other supplies," he warned. Roosevelt responded with the Lend-Lease program, a groundbreaking agreement that would provide Britain with the funds and supplies it needed to continue the fight. The program was a lifeline for Britain, allowing the nation to purchase tanks, planes, food, and other essential supplies. The Lend-Lease program was a brilliant strategy. It allowed the United States to support Britain without officially entering the war. For Churchill, it was a game changer. With the program in place, Britain could keep fighting. But Churchill knew that victory wouldn't come from equipment and supplies alone. The war would also be won through resilience, determination, and the unbreakable spirit of the British people. One of the most defining moments of Churchill's leadership came during the Dunkirk evacuation. In May 1940, thousands of British and Allied troops were stranded on the beaches of Dunkirk, surrounded by enemy forces. The situation looked hopeless, but Churchill refused to accept defeat. He called on everyone, soldiers, civilians, and even small boats, to help rescue the stranded troops. It was a daring and dangerous operation, with constant threats from the air and sea. Against all odds, the rescue mission succeeded. Over 300,000 soldiers were saved from the beaches of Dunkirk. The operation became known as the Miracle of Dunkirk, and it provided a massive morale boost for Britain. For Churchill, Dunkirk was a testament to the resilience and determination of the British people. It showed that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could rise to the occasion and achieve the impossible. What happens next? How did Churchill's leadership shape the outcome of World War II? What were the challenges and controversies he faced along the way? Stay tuned, because the story is far from over. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this incredible journey. The best is yet to come. Asterisk. By the end of World War II, Churchill's leadership had become legendary. His speeches had rallied a nation, his decisions had shaped the course of history, and his unwavering resolve had helped defeat one of the most brutal regimes the world had ever seen. But as the dust of war settled, Churchill faced a new challenge, one that would test him in ways he never expected. The war was won. Hitler's Germany had been defeated, and the Allies stood victorious. But as Churchill looked out over a war-torn Britain, he realized that the people were not celebrating. Instead, they were exhausted, weary, and hungry for change. The nation had endured years of sacrifice, rationing, and loss. Now, they wanted a government that would focus on rebuilding their lives, not just their country. On July 26, 1945, the results of the general election came in. It was one of the biggest shocks in British political history. Despite leading the nation to victory, Churchill and the Conservative Party were voted out in a landslide. The Labour Party, with its promises of social reform, a national health service, and the nationalization of key industries, had captured the hearts of the people. For Churchill, the defeat was a bitter pill to swallow. He had dedicated his life to serving his country, only to be rejected at the moment of triumph. But the people's message was clear. They wanted change. They wanted housing, healthcare, and a government that cared about their everyday struggles. But Churchill's story didn't end there. In 1951, the Conservatives made a comeback, and Churchill became Prime Minister for the second time. However, this time was different. The years of war and politics had taken their toll. Churchill was older, and the fire that had once driven him seemed to flicker. While his speeches still stirred hearts, his ability to lead with the same vigor had diminished. He relied heavily on his cabinet, trusting them to take charge of the day-to-day governance. But even in this new role, Churchill's vision for Britain remained unwavering. He wanted to see his nation excel not just in war, but in peace as well. Post-war Britain was a nation in crisis. The economy was struggling, resources were scarce, and the people were desperate for stability. Churchill knew that rebuilding the country would require more than just speeches. It would require bold economic policies and a steady hand. By his side was Richard "Rab" Butler, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Butler was a visionary who understood the importance of Keynesian economics. He believed that government intervention could stabilize the economy and create jobs. Churchill, who had always relied on experts for financial matters, trusted Butler's judgment and supported his policies. Together, they focused on three key areas: ensuring full employment, preserving the welfare state, and investing in Britain's nuclear defense program. These policies were designed to strengthen the economy, provide security, and give the people hope for a better future. One of the most significant challenges facing post-war Britain was rationing. During the war, food and supplies had been tightly controlled to ensure fair distribution. But by the 1950s, the people were tired of living with restrictions. They wanted to see an end to the austerity that had defined their lives for so long. Churchill's government took steps to ease rationing, and in 1954, it finally came to an end. For the British people, this was a moment of celebration. It felt like the country was finally emerging from the shadow of war. The end of rationing was a morale boost, a sign that better days were ahead. The war had left many homes destroyed, and thousands of families were in desperate need of housing. Churchill's government made a promise to provide 300,000 affordable and decent homes for the people. It was a bold goal, but one that was desperately needed. The housing program was a success, and it marked a significant step in rebuilding the country. It showed that Churchill's government was committed to addressing the needs of the people, not just the needs of the nation. One of the most enduring legacies of post-war Britain was the National Health Service, NHS. Introduced by the Labour government, the NHS provided free healthcare to all citizens. It was a revolutionary idea, and one that Churchill's government chose to support rather than dismantle. Churchill understood that the people needed more than just roofs over their heads. They needed healthcare, security, and hope. By preserving the NHS and the welfare state, Churchill showed that even a wartime leader could adapt to the needs of a nation at peace. Winston Churchill's legacy is complex. He was a man of contradictions, a wartime hero who was voted out of office, a leader who inspired millions but also faced controversy. Yet, through it all, he remained committed to his nation. Whether leading Britain through the darkest days of war or navigating the challenges of peace, Churchill's vision never wavered. He believed in the strength and resilience of the British people, and he dedicated his life to serving them. The story of Winston Churchill is not just about war and leadership, it's also about vision and transformation. After the dust of World War II settled, Churchill found himself facing a new kind of battle. This time, it wasn't against an enemy army, but against economic instability and the need to rebuild a shattered world. Churchill, a man of tradition and free market principles, was not initially enthusiastic about the idea of a welfare state. He believed in individualism and the power of the free market. But he was also a realist. He knew that the world had changed, and so had the needs of the people. The concept of a welfare state was not popular among conservatives. It challenged traditional beliefs and required a shift in thinking. But Churchill was never one to follow the crowd. He was a pioneer, unafraid to venture into uncharted territory if it meant creating a better future. Under Churchill's leadership, Britain took bold steps toward building a welfare state. These measures were groundbreaking for their time. They included labor exchanges to connect workers with jobs, minimum wages for those in underpaid industries, and the world's first unemployment insurance system. These initiatives were not just about helping people, they were about rebuilding the economy. By putting money back into the hands of the people, Churchill's policies sparked demand and stimulated growth. People could now afford to buy what they needed, and this created a ripple effect that helped the economy recover. But the challenges were not confined to Britain alone. The entire world was struggling with the aftermath of the war. Economies were in shambles, and leaders were desperate to find solutions. The question on everyone's mind was simple yet daunting. How could they prevent another global catastrophe? In 1941, two of the most powerful leaders of the time, Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, met aboard a ship in the North Atlantic. Together, they signed the Atlantic Charter, a document that laid the foundation for a new world order. This historic meeting set the stage for the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, where delegates from around the world gathered to address the economic challenges of the post-war era. The delegates at Bretton Woods believed that the Second World War was not just a result of political and military failures, but also economic ones. They pointed to the harsh reparations imposed after World War I and the protectionist trade policies that followed as key factors that led to global instability. Churchill, who had witnessed the devastating effects of the Great Depression, agreed. He believed that economic instability had played a significant role in the outbreak of the war. But he also emphasized that broader political and military issues had contributed to the crisis. The goal of the Bretton Woods Conference was clear: to create a system that would promote global economic stability and prevent future conflicts. The delegates agreed to encourage free trade, stabilize foreign exchange rates, and lay the foundation for lasting international cooperation. The result of the conference was the Bretton Woods system, a groundbreaking agreement that changed the course of economic history. Under this system, countries tied their currencies to the US dollar, which was itself backed by gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. This setup provided much-needed stability and made international trade more predictable. It also laid the groundwork for global economic cooperation. But the Bretton Woods system didn't stop there. It led to the creation of two key institutions: the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. The IMF was tasked with ensuring global economic stability, while the World Bank focused on promoting development worldwide. Together, these institutions played a crucial role in rebuilding the post-war world. Churchill was not just a bystander in these historic events. He was a key player. His leadership and vision were instrumental in shaping the Bretton Woods system. He understood the importance of international cooperation and worked tirelessly to ensure that Britain played a leading role in the New World Order. For Churchill, the Bretton Woods system was more than just an economic agreement. It was a way to prevent future conflicts and create a more stable and prosperous world. His support for the system showed that even a man of tradition could adapt to the changing needs of the times. As the world moved toward collectivism in the mid-20th century, Churchill stood firm as a champion of free market policies and individual freedom. But even as he fought for these ideals, his decisions and beliefs often sparked heated debates that continue to this day. In the years following World War II, the political landscape of Britain was shifting. The Labour Party, with its socialist agenda, was gaining strength, while the Liberals were losing ground. Churchill, ever the defender of capitalism, became a vocal critic of socialism. He believed it threatened not only individual freedom but also Britain's position as a global financial powerhouse. Between 1945 and 1951, Churchill was in the opposition party. Yet, during this time, he delivered some of his most powerful speeches. He warned against the dangers of socialism, calling it a narrow, cramping doctrine that could stifle economic progress. His words resonated deeply with many, including a young Margaret Thatcher, who would later put his vision of economic liberty into action. One of Churchill's most famous quotes came in October 1945, when he stood in the House of Commons and declared, "The inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent blessing of socialism is the equal sharing of misery." These words were more than just political rhetoric. They were a rallying cry for freedom and economic growth. But Churchill's legacy is not without its shadows. One of the most controversial chapters of his leadership was his handling of the Bengal famine in 1943. This devastating famine took place in British-occupied India and claimed the lives of 3 million people. Many historians argue that Churchill's policies exacerbated the crisis. Despite being fully aware of the severity of the famine, Churchill did little to alleviate the suffering of the Indian people. Relief efforts were delayed, and when they finally arrived, it was too late for millions. This tragedy remains a stain on Churchill's legacy, a reminder of the human cost of colonial rule. Churchill's racial views have also drawn criticism. He saw himself and Britain as being at the top of what he called the social Darwinian hierarchy. His views on colonized peoples were deeply troubling. In 1919, as Minister of War, Churchill penned a memo expressing support for the use of poison gas against what he described as uncivilized tribes, referring to the Kurds and Afghans. "I cannot understand this squeamishness about the use of gas," he wrote. These words reveal a side of Churchill that is hard to reconcile with the image of the heroic wartime leader. They serve as a stark reminder that even the most admired figures in history can have deeply flawed and troubling beliefs. As Churchill grew older, he became less active in public life. His health declined, and he spent much of his time at his home in Chartwell. On January 24, 1965, at the age of 90, Churchill spoke his last words. Asterisk, I'm bored with it all. Asterisk, it was a poignant end for a man who had lived such an extraordinary life. Churchill's legacy is one of strength, leadership, and determination. His speeches during World War II rallied a nation and inspired the world. He didn't just lead Britain through war. He mobilized the English language and sent it into battle. His words became weapons, his voice a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. Churchill's vision extended far beyond Britain. He believed in a united world, one where strong alliances could prevent future conflicts. In 1946, he delivered his famous Iron Curtain speech in Fulton, Missouri. He called for a strong Anglo-American alliance, arguing that Britain and the United States shared common values and a common destiny. Churchill saw this partnership as essential for maintaining peace in a world still recovering from the devastation of war. He believed that the power of America's atomic bomb, combined with the strength of the Anglo-American alliance, could serve as a stabilizing force in a turbulent world. Let's be honest, Churchill was not a financial genius. He would probably be the first to admit that numbers were not his strong suit. But when it came to economic policy, his approach was pragmatic. He trusted experts to handle the details while he focused on the bigger picture. This approach had its successes and its failures. The return to the gold standard in 1925, for example, had long-lasting consequences for the British economy. It led to deflation, high unemployment, and widespread hardship. Yet, Churchill's willingness to adapt and learn from his mistakes was one of his greatest strengths. Opinions about Churchill remain deeply divided. To some, he was a fearless leader who knew how to seize the moment. He built strong global alliances, led Britain to victory in World War II, and inspired millions with his words. To others, he was a flawed figure whose decisions and beliefs continue to draw criticism. His handling of the Bengal famine, his racial views, and his support for controversial policies like the gold standard are often cited as examples of his missteps. Yet, even his harshest critics cannot deny his ability to rally people in times of need. As we reflect on Churchill's life and legacy, one thing is clear: he was a man of his time. His strengths and weaknesses, his triumphs and failures, are a reflection of the world he lived in. He was a leader who shaped history, for better or worse. Ladies and gentlemen, Churchill once said, asterisk, permit me please to claim your attention for a moment. It can only be a moment, for of course, in this and in most other things, we are all on the ration. Asterisk. Asterisk, if you've made it this far, thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Winston Churchill. Don't forget to leave an upside-down smiley emoji in the comments if you enjoyed this video. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of history's most fascinating figures. What are your thoughts on Churchill's legacy? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Asterisk.